The Royal Guard Story. First part. Marcus Thompson had served his country for 12 years before becoming a Royal Guard at Buckingham Palace. His chest displayed ribbons that told stories of courage most people could never imagine. The purple and silver medal from Afghanistan caught sunlight as he stood perfectly still outside the palace gates. Tourists snapped photos while he remained motionless like a statue. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Marcus put on his red uniform with gold buttons and checked each medal was positioned correctly. His black boots shined like mirrors. The bearskin hat sat heavy on his head, but he wore it with pride. Every piece of his uniform represented honor and duty. At exactly 8 o'clock, Marcus took his position outside the main entrance. Cars passed by carrying important visitors. School children pressed their faces against tour bus windows, amazed by his stillness. He had learned to ignore everything around him during training. Royal Guards never moved, never spoke, never showed emotion while on duty. The morning sun grew stronger as crowds gathered. American tourists asked their guide why the guard never blinked. Japanese visitors took selfies next to Marcus, careful not to touch him. He could hear every word but showed no reaction. This was his job and he took it seriously. Around noon, a group of young men approached the palace gates. They wore torn jeans and hooded sweatshirts despite the warm weather. Their leader was Jake Morrison, a 23-year-old with tattoos covering his neck. Jake had spent more time in jail than school. His friends followed him everywhere, hoping to impress him with their loyalty. Jake stopped directly in front of Marcus and stared at his medals. The shiny ribbons caught his attention immediately. He had never owned anything valuable in his life. His family lived in a small apartment where nothing worked properly. Seeing Marcus wearing expensive-looking decorations made Jake angry for reasons he could not explain. "Look at this fancy soldier boy," Jake said loudly to his friends. "All dressed up like he's somebody important." Marcus continued, staring straight ahead. His training had prepared him for situations like this. Troublemakers often tried to get reactions from Royal Guards. The best response was no response at all. His breathing stayed calm and steady. Jake moved closer, studying each medal carefully. The largest one had a crown symbol with diamonds that sparkled in the sunlight. He wondered how much money these decorations might be worth. His rent was due next week, and he had no legal way to pay it. "What did you do to earn these pretty little toys?" Jake asked, waving his hand near Marcus's chest. "Did Mommy buy them for you at the gift shop?" The other tourists stepped back, sensing trouble. A mother pulled her children closer and whispered for them to stay quiet. An elderly man with a camera lowered it slowly, worried about what might happen next. The atmosphere changed from peaceful to tense in seconds. Jake's friends laughed nervously at his comments. They knew he enjoyed causing problems, but this seemed different. Royal Guards were protected by serious laws. Bothering them could lead to immediate arrest. Still, they said nothing because contradicting Jake always led to bigger problems. Marcus felt sweat forming under his heavy uniform, but his face showed nothing. Inside his mind, he reviewed his training about dealing with aggressive civilians. He was not allowed to move or speak unless someone was in immediate physical danger. The situation had not reached that point yet. "I bet these medals are worth more than my car," Jake continued, reaching toward Marcus's chest. "Maybe I should take a closer look." A police officer noticed the growing crowd and began walking toward the palace gates. His radio crackled with routine messages as he approached. He had dealt with similar situations before and knew exactly how to handle them. Royal Guards depended on police support when tourists became too aggressive. Jake saw the approaching officer but felt too committed to back down now. His friends were watching and the crowd had grown larger. Walking away would make him look weak. He had built his reputation on never backing down from anyone, regardless of the consequences. The tension continued building as more people gathered to watch. Some visitors started recording with their phones, sensing they might witness something dramatic. A tour guide tried directing her group away from the area, but they resisted moving. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Marcus noticed Jake's body language becoming more aggressive. His fists were clenched and he kept moving closer. The training instructors had taught Marcus to recognize warning signs of potential violence. This situation was approaching that dangerous line. Behind the palace gates, security cameras captured every moment. Guards inside the building monitored multiple screens, ready to respond if needed. They had protocols for various types of incidents involving the exterior guards. Radio communication stayed open between all security personnel. Jake's anger grew stronger as Marcus continued ignoring him completely. Being dismissed made Jake feel small and powerless. Throughout his life, people had overlooked him or treated him as unimportant. He was determined not to let this fancy soldier do the same thing. "You think you're better than me because of those shiny medals?" Jake shouted. "I could take them right off your chest and you couldn't stop me." The crowd gasped at this threat. Several people stepped back further, realizing this was becoming serious. The police officer quickened his pace, speaking into his radio as he approached. Backup units were being called to the scene as a precaution. Marcus felt his heart rate increase slightly but maintained perfect posture. He could see Jake's reflection in the palace windows behind him. The young man's aggressive stance suggested he might actually attempt to grab the medals. That would cross the line into physical assault. The morning that started so peacefully was transforming into something much more dangerous. Neither Marcus nor Jake fully understood how dramatically their lives were about to change. The next few minutes would test everything Marcus had learned about duty, honor, and self-control. The Royal Guard Story. Second part. The police officer reached the growing crowd just as Jake made his first real move toward Marcus. Officer David Chen had patrolled this area for 5 years and recognized the signs of escalating trouble. He positioned himself where he could intervene quickly if needed, while keeping his radio ready for emergency backup. Jake studied the medals more closely, particularly fascinated by the largest one. It displayed a golden crown with small gems that caught light from every angle. He had never seen anything so beautiful and expensive looking up close. His mind raced with thoughts about how much money he could get for such items. "These medals must cost more than most people make in a year," Jake muttered to his friends. "Look at all that gold and those diamonds. This guy is wearing a fortune on his chest." Marcus could hear every word but maintained his statue-like pose. His military training had included extensive instruction about valuable decorations worn by service members. The medals represented years of dangerous service, not expensive jewelry. Each ribbon told a story of sacrifice that Jake could never understand. The crowd continued growing as word spread about the confrontation. Hotel guests from across the street came outside to watch. Street vendors stopped selling souvenirs to focus on the drama unfolding. Everyone sensed they might witness something extraordinary. Jake's friend Tommy whispered urgently in his ear. "Maybe we should leave, Jake. That cop is getting closer and this doesn't look good." But Jake had passed the point of backing down. Too many people were watching now. His reputation in the neighborhood depended on never showing weakness. He had spent years building an image of someone who feared nothing and no one. "I'm not afraid of some toy soldier," Jake announced loudly. "Let's see how tough he really is when someone challenges him." Officer Chen stepped closer, his hand resting on his radio. He had dealt with Jake Morrison before during previous incidents in the area. The young man had a history of theft and assault charges. Chen knew Jake was unpredictable and capable of violence when cornered. Marcus felt the situation reaching a critical point. His superior officers had briefed all guards about procedures for handling physical threats. If Jake actually touched the medals or uniform, Marcus would be authorized to defend himself and the crown property he protected. The medals Jake admired so intensely had deep personal meaning for Marcus. The largest one came from a mission in Afghanistan where he had rescued 3 wounded soldiers under enemy fire. Another represented his service during a natural disaster where he helped evacuate civilians. Each decoration symbolized moments when he had risked everything for others. Jake reached toward the crown medal with his right hand, fingers extended. Several people in the crowd gasped audibly. Cameras and phones captured every second as the moment of contact approached. Time seemed to move in slow motion as everyone held their breath. "Don't even think about it," Officer Chen called out firmly. "Step away from the guard immediately." Jake hesitated for just a moment, his hand inches from Marcus's chest. He could feel the heat radiating from the crowd's attention. This was his moment to prove he feared no authority figure, whether soldier or police officer. Marcus prepared mentally for what might come next. If Jake touched the medals, protocol required immediate defensive action. Years of combat training had taught him to respond instantly to threats. His muscles tensed slightly, though his face remained perfectly calm. The tension became almost unbearable as Jake's hand hovered near the shining medals. Tourist guides tried moving their groups to safer distances. Parents covered their children's eyes, expecting violence to erupt at any moment. Even Jake's own friend stepped back, not wanting to be caught in whatever happened next. Jake's fingers brushed against the crown medal's ribbon. The contact lasted only a split second, but it crossed the legal line from harassment to theft and assault. Marcus felt the slight pressure against his uniform and immediately shifted into defensive mode. "That's it. You're under arrest," Officer Chen shouted, moving quickly toward Jake. But Jake had already committed to his course of action. Instead of backing away, he grabbed the crown medal firmly and yanked hard, trying to rip it from Marcus's uniform. The ribbon strained but held strong, designed to withstand much more force than Jake could apply. Marcus reacted with lightning speed, his right hand shooting up to grab Jake's wrist. 12 years of military training took over as he applied pressure to specific points that would force Jake to release his grip. The transformation from statue to soldier happened in milliseconds. "Release the medal immediately," Marcus said in a voice that carried absolute authority. These were the first words he had spoken during his entire shift, and they cut through the crowd noise like a knife. Jake found himself in a grip stronger than anything he had ever experienced. Marcus's fingers felt like steel cables around his wrist. For the first time that day, real fear entered Jake's eyes as he realized he had badly underestimated this royal guard. The crowd erupted in chaos as people pushed to get better views or escape potential danger. Officer Chen reached the struggle and immediately called for backup units. His radio crackled with urgent messages as additional police cars raced toward the palace. Jake tried pulling away but discovered Marcus's grip was unbreakable. The medals remained firmly attached to the uniform, and Jake's hand was trapped against the guard's chest. His friends scattered in different directions, abandoning him as they always did when real trouble started. "Let me go," Jake shouted, panic rising in his voice. "I wasn't doing anything wrong." Marcus maintained his hold while Officer Chen approached with handcuffs ready. The situation had escalated beyond simple harassment into attempted theft of crown property. Jake faced serious charges that could result in years in prison. Security guards from inside the palace emerged to assist with crowd control. The area around the main entrance became a scene of organized chaos as police worked to restore order. Multiple officers formed a protective circle around Marcus and the arrested suspect. Jake's attempted theft had failed completely, but the consequences were just beginning. His decision to mock and grab the Royal Guard's medals had set in motion events that would change his life forever. The shining decorations he had tried to steal represented honors he could never understand or deserve. The Royal Guard story. Third Part Officer Chen snapped the handcuffs onto Jake's wrists with practiced efficiency. The metal clicked shut with a sound that made several tourists jump. Jake winced as the cuffs bit into his skin, finally understanding the serious trouble he had created for himself. His brief moment of defiance had transformed into a nightmare. Marcus released his grip once Jake was properly restrained. He straightened his uniform and checked that all medals remained secure in their proper positions. The crown medal showed no damage despite Jake's aggressive attempt to rip it away. Years of military precision had saved the precious decoration from harm. "You have the right to remain silent," Officer Chen began, reciting the familiar words that marked the beginning of Jake's legal troubles. The crowd listened to every word, many recording the arrest on their phones. Within minutes, videos of the incident would spread across social media platforms worldwide. Jake struggled against the handcuffs, still not fully accepting what had happened. "This is ridiculous. I barely touched the stupid medal. You can't arrest me for looking at something." But the evidence told a different story. Dozens of witnesses had seen him grab the crown medal and attempt to steal it. Security cameras had captured every moment from multiple angles. His defense would be impossible when the case reached court. Marcus resumed his position as if nothing had occurred. His breathing returned to normal and his face showed no emotion. Other royal guards were trained to continue their duties regardless of disruptions. The incident had lasted less than 5 minutes, but Jake's life had changed forever. Additional police officers arrived to help control the growing crowd. The arrest had attracted even more attention, with people pushing forward to get better views. Street vendors began selling "I was there" t-shirts within minutes, capitalizing on the dramatic events unfolding at the palace gates. Officer Chen searched Jake's pockets and found a collection of stolen items from earlier that morning. Wallets, phones, and jewelry filled a small bag hidden inside his jacket. The attempted metal theft was just the latest in a series of crimes Jake had committed that day. Each item would add additional charges to his growing list of legal problems. "Looks like you've been busy today," Chen observed, examining the stolen goods. "These thefts happened all over the city. We've been looking for you since dawn." Jake's face went pale as he realized the full scope of his situation. What started as harassment of a royal guard had exposed his entire criminal operation. The metals that attracted his attention had become the trap that caught him red-handed, with evidence of multiple felonies. The crowd gradually dispersed as police established order around the palace entrance. Tour guides led their groups to other attractions, though many visitors kept glancing back at the scene. The incident had become the most exciting part of their London vacation. Marcus noticed a young boy staring at him with wide eyes filled with admiration. The child had watched the entire confrontation and seemed amazed by Marcus's calm handling of the dangerous situation. These moments reminded Marcus why he took pride in serving as a royal guard. Detective Sarah Walsh arrived to take over the investigation from Officer Chen. She specialized in crimes involving crown property and government facilities. Jake's case would require careful documentation since it involved both attempted theft and assault on a royal guard. "This is a very serious matter," Detective Walsh explained to Jake as she read through the charges. "Attempting to steal medals from a royal guard carries a minimum sentence of 3 years in prison. Combined with your other thefts today, you're looking at much longer." Jake finally began understanding the magnitude of his mistakes. His simple plan to grab some valuable medals had destroyed his future completely. The shining decorations that caught his attention represented years of honorable service, something he had never understood or valued. Marcus watched as police led Jake toward their vehicle. He felt no satisfaction in seeing the young man arrested, only sadness that someone had chosen such a destructive path. The medals Jake tried to steal told stories of protecting others, not harming them. The investigation revealed that Jake had been planning the medal theft for weeks. He had visited the palace multiple times, studying the guards and looking for opportunities. His criminal friends had encouraged the plan, believing royal medals would be worth thousands on the black market. But they had completely misunderstood the true value of military decorations. The medals were priceless to those who earned them through service and sacrifice, but worthless to common thieves. No legitimate buyer would purchase stolen military honors, making the entire scheme pointless from the beginning. Detective Walsh interviewed witnesses who had recorded the incident on their phones. The video evidence clearly showed Jake's aggressive approach and his attempt to grab the crown medal. His claims of innocence became more ridiculous with each piece of evidence collected. Palace security reviewed all camera footage from the morning to create a complete timeline of events. Jake's reconnaissance visits from previous weeks were clearly visible in the recordings. His pattern of behavior proved the theft attempt was premeditated rather than impulsive. Marcus continued his shift as if nothing unusual had happened. Royal guards were trained to maintain composure regardless of circumstances. The other tourists who arrived later had no idea that a dramatic arrest had occurred just hours earlier. The stolen wallets and phones found in Jake's possession belonged to tourists from around the world. Detective Walsh began the process of returning the items to their owners, many of whom were grateful to recover their valuables before returning home. Jake sat in the police car, staring through the window at Marcus standing perfectly still at his post. The Royal Guard represented everything Jake had never learned about honor, duty, and respect. The medals on Marcus's chest told stories of courage that Jake could never understand. As the police car drove away from Buckingham Palace, Jake realized his life had reached a point of no return. His decision to mock and attempt stealing from a royal guard had exposed all his criminal activities and guaranteed years in prison. The shining medals that attracted his attention had become the symbol of his complete downfall. The Royal Guard story, 4th part. The police station buzzed with activity as Detective Walsh processed Jake's case. The evidence room filled with stolen items recovered from his pockets, each piece representing another victim of his criminal spree. Jake sat in the interrogation room, handcuffs still locked around his wrists, finally beginning to understand the serious consequences of his actions. "You've had quite a busy morning," Detective Walsh said, spreading photos across the table. 12 separate thefts before you even reached the palace. Then you decided to assault a royal guard and attempt stealing crown property. Jake stared at the evidence photos without speaking. His usual confidence had completely disappeared once he realized the full scope of his legal troubles. The charges were mounting faster than he could comprehend, and each one carried significant prison time. Meanwhile, back at Buckingham Palace, Marcus continued his duty as if the dramatic arrest had never happened. His training emphasized returning to normal operations immediately after any incident. Tourists approached cautiously, having heard rumors about earlier excitement, but found only the usual silent, motionless guard. The crown medal that Jake had tried to steal held special significance for Marcus. He had earned it during a dangerous rescue mission in Afghanistan, where enemy forces had surrounded his unit. Under heavy gunfire, he had carried 3 wounded soldiers to safety, risking his own life multiple times during the evacuation. Detective Walsh reviewed Jake's criminal history, which painted a picture of escalating lawlessness over several years. Starting with shoplifting as a teenager, he had progressed to burglary, assault, and now attempted theft of crown property. Each arrest had been followed by short jail sentences that failed to change his behavior. This time is different, Walsh explained to Jake's court-appointed lawyer. Attacking a royal guard while attempting to steal military decorations carries mandatory minimum sentences. Combined with his record and the multiple thefts from this morning, he's looking at 8 to 12 years minimum. The lawyer, Michael Bradford, reviewed the case files with growing concern. Jake's actions had been captured on multiple security cameras from various angles. Witness statements from tourists were consistent and damning. Even the most skilled defense attorney would struggle to find reasonable doubt in such a clear-cut case. News of the arrest spread quickly through local media outlets. The story of a thug attempting to steal medals from a royal guard captured public attention immediately. Television crews gathered outside the police station, hoping to catch glimpses of Jake during his transfer to court. Inside the interrogation room, Jake finally spoke after hours of silence. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just thought the medals looked valuable and I needed money for rent." Detective Walsh leaned forward, recognizing this as Jake's first admission of guilt. "So you're admitting you intended to steal the crown medal from the Royal Guard?" Jake realized his mistake immediately but could not take back his words. His confession would make the prosecutor's case even stronger. Every statement he made seemed to dig him deeper into legal trouble. The victims of Jake's earlier thefts began arriving at the police station to identify their stolen property. A retired teacher from Germany wept with relief when she recovered her late husband's wedding ring. An American college student thanked officers for finding his laptop containing his thesis research. Marcus learned about Jake's extensive criminal history during his evening briefing. The young man who had mocked his medals and attempted theft had been preying on innocent tourists all morning. The arrest had stopped a crime spree that might have continued for hours longer. "You handled the situation perfectly," his commanding officer told Marcus. "Your restraint prevented escalation while still protecting crown property. The incident will be noted in your service record as exemplary conduct under pressure." Jake spent his first night in jail surrounded by criminals who showed no sympathy for his situation. His cellmates laughed when they learned he had tried stealing medals from a royal guard. Even among thieves and drug dealers, his target choice seemed particularly stupid and disrespectful. Detective Walsh worked late into the evening, connecting Jake's stolen items to police reports filed throughout the morning. The pattern showed he had targeted elderly tourists and women traveling alone, choosing victims who seemed least likely to fight back. His cowardice made his later confrontation with Marcus seem even more foolish. The crown medal that had fascinated Jake represented courage Jake could never understand. Marcus had earned it by running toward danger while others fled to safety. The golden decoration symbolized everything Jake lacked: honor, selflessness, and genuine bravery. Court documents revealed Jake's troubled background. Raised in poverty by a single mother who worked multiple jobs, he had dropped out of school at 16 and never learned legitimate job skills. His turn toward crime had seemed like an easy solution to financial problems, but each arrest had made finding honest work more difficult. Mental health evaluations ordered by the court showed Jake suffered from anger management issues and poor impulse control. Years of making quick decisions based on immediate desires had led him to this moment of ultimate consequences. His inability to think beyond the next few minutes had finally caught up with him. The public reaction to the arrest was overwhelmingly negative toward Jake. Social media comments condemned his disrespect toward military service and his choice to target tourists visiting London. Many people called for maximum sentences to send a message about protecting royal guards and crown property. Marcus's calm professionalism during the incident earned praise from palace officials and the general public. Video footage of his restraint while being harassed, followed by his swift action when actually threatened, became a perfect example of proper royal guard conduct. As Jake awaited his court appearance, he began writing letters to the victims of his thefts. His lawyer encouraged these apologies as possible mitigation during sentencing, though the damage to his case was already severe. Each letter forced Jake to confront the real harm his selfish actions had caused innocent people. The stolen items recovered from Jake's possession told stories of personal loss and violation. Wedding rings, family photographs, and treasured keepsakes had been carelessly stuffed into his pockets like worthless objects. His inability to recognize the emotional value of these items revealed the depth of his disconnection from normal human empathy. The Royal Guard Story, 5th part. The courtroom was packed with spectators, media representatives, and victims of Jake's crimes when his trial began 3 months later. Judge Patricia Hamilton presided over the proceedings with the stern demeanor befitting such a serious case involving crown property and assault on a royal guard. The charges had grown to include 14 counts of theft, 1 count of assault, and 1 count of attempted theft of crown property. Jake sat beside his lawyer, Michael Bradford, wearing an ill-fitting suit borrowed from the court's clothing program. His appearance had changed dramatically during his months in jail awaiting trial. The cocky swagger that had characterized his approach to Marcus was completely gone, replaced by nervous fidgeting and downcast eyes. Prosecutor Jennifer Mills opened her case with video footage from the palace security cameras. The courtroom watched in silence as Jake approached Marcus, mocked his medals, and eventually attempted to grab the crown decoration. The crystal-clear evidence left no doubt about his intentions or actions. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mills addressed the 12 citizens chosen to decide Jake's fate. You have just witnessed a brazen attempt to steal precious military decorations from a royal guard performing his duty. But this was not an isolated incident of poor judgment. This defendant spent the entire morning terrorizing innocent tourists and stealing their personal possessions. Marcus was called as the prosecution's first witness. He entered the courtroom in his dress uniform, medals displayed prominently across his chest. The same crown medal that Jake had tried to steal caught the light as Marcus took the oath to tell the truth. His presence commanded immediate respect from everyone present. Please describe the events of that morning, Prosecutor Mills requested after Marcus had been sworn in. Marcus recounted the incident with military precision, describing Jake's increasingly aggressive behavior, the mocking comments about his medals, and the final attempt to grab the crown decoration. His calm, professional testimony contrasted sharply with Jake's desperate appearance at the defendant's table. Can you tell the jury about the significance of the medal the defendant attempted to steal? Mills asked, pointing toward the crown decoration on Marcus's chest. Marcus touched the medal gently before responding. This decoration was awarded for actions during a rescue mission in Afghanistan. Enemy forces had our unit surrounded, and 3 of my fellow soldiers were wounded and unable to move. I managed to carry each of them to safety under heavy gunfire. 2 of those men are alive today because of that mission. The courtroom fell completely silent as Marcus described the dangerous rescue that had earned him the crown medal. Several jurors visibly showed their respect for his service and sacrifice. The contrast between Marcus's heroic actions and Jake's criminal behavior became starkly apparent. Defense attorney Bradford faced an impossible task during his cross-examination. The evidence was overwhelming, and Jake's confession to Detective Walsh had eliminated most potential arguments. His only strategy was to emphasize Jake's difficult childhood and lack of opportunities, hoping for reduced sentencing. Sergeant Thompson, Bradford began carefully, you've clearly lived an honorable life of service. Can you imagine how someone from a very different background might make poor choices out of desperation? Marcus considered the question thoughtfully before answering. I understand that people face different challenges in life. However, that morning the defendant had already stolen from 12 innocent tourists before approaching me. His actions showed a pattern of choosing to harm others for personal gain, regardless of his background. The victims of Jake's earlier thefts testified throughout the second day of trial. An elderly woman from Japan described how losing her late husband's watch had devastated her. during what was supposed to be a healing vacation. A young father explained how Jake's theft of his wallet had left him unable to pay for his children's meals. Each testimony revealed the real human cost of Jake's criminal spree. These were not faceless victims of property crime, but real people whose lives had been disrupted by his selfish actions. The stolen items represented memories, security, and trust that Jake had carelessly destroyed. Detective Walsh presented the timeline of Jake's crimes, showing how he had systematically targeted vulnerable tourists throughout the morning. Security camera footage tracked his movements from theft to theft, building toward the confrontation at the palace. His methods showed calculation and planning rather than desperate impulse. The prosecution's case concluded with expert testimony about the value and significance of military decorations. A historian explained how medals like Marcus's crown decoration represented the highest ideals of service and sacrifice. Attempting to steal such symbols constituted an attack on military honor itself. Jake's defense team called character witnesses who described his difficult upbringing and limited opportunities. His mother testified tearfully about working 3 jobs to support her son and her disappointment in his choices. Former teachers recalled a bright child who had lost his way after dropping out of school. Mental health experts explained how Jake's problems with impulse control and anger management had contributed to his criminal behavior. They recommended treatment programs and counseling rather than purely punitive measures, arguing that prison alone would not address the root causes of his actions. However, the prosecution countered that Jake's crimes showed clear planning and conscious decision-making. His reconnaissance visits to the palace proved the medal theft was premeditated. His targeting of vulnerable tourists demonstrated strategic thinking rather than mental health problems. During closing arguments, Prosecutor Mills emphasized the seriousness of attacking symbols of military service and crown property. The defendant chose to mock a decorated war hero and attempt stealing the medal that represents his courage under fire. This court must send a clear message that such disrespect and criminality will face severe consequences. Defense attorney Bradford made a final plea for mercy, arguing that long imprisonment would destroy any chance for Jake to reform his life. My client made terrible choices that morning, but he comes from circumstances that offered him little guidance toward better decisions. Treatment and supervision can help him become a productive citizen. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours before reaching their verdict. When court reconvened, the foreman stood to deliver their decision. On all counts of theft, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of assault, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of attempted theft of crown property, we find the defendant guilty. Jake's shoulders sagged as each guilty verdict was read aloud. His mother wept quietly in the gallery while victims of his crimes showed visible relief that justice had been served. The trial had concluded exactly as most observers had expected from the moment they saw the security camera footage. Judge Hamilton scheduled sentencing for the following week, allowing time for pre-sentence reports and victim impact statements. Jake would spend those days in jail, contemplating the life-changing consequences of his decision to mock and attack a Royal Guard's medals. The Royal Guard story. Final part. Judge Patricia Hamilton entered her courtroom one final time for Jake Morrison's sentencing hearing. The same packed gallery that had witnessed his conviction now waited to learn his punishment for the crimes that had shocked London and captured international attention. Jake sat motionless beside his attorney, having aged visibly during the months since his arrest outside Buckingham Palace. Victim impact statements began the proceedings, giving voice to those whose lives Jake had disrupted during his morning crime spree. Mrs. Tanaka, the elderly Japanese tourist whose husband's watch had been stolen, spoke through tears about how the theft had ruined her pilgrimage to places they had planned to visit together. Before his death, that watch was the last gift my husband gave me before he passed away, she said softly. When this young man stole it, he stole my final connection to 50 years of marriage. No amount of punishment can return what he took from my heart. The young father whose wallet theft had left him unable to feed his children described the panic and helplessness of being stranded in a foreign country without money. My 6-year-old daughter asked why the bad man had taken our food money. I had no answer that could make sense to a child. Marcus was invited to address the court regarding the attack on his person and the attempted theft of his military decorations. He stood in full dress uniform, the same crown medal that had attracted Jake's criminal attention prominently displayed. His words carried the weight of 12 years of honorable military service. Your Honor, the medal this defendant attempted to steal represents more than personal recognition. It symbolizes the sacrifice of every soldier who puts service before self. When he mocked and grabbed these decorations, he attacked the honor of all who serve. However, I hope this court will consider that punishment should lead to redemption, not merely retribution. Marcus's call for measured justice surprised many observers who expected him to demand maximum penalties. His magnanimous response reflected the character that had earned him the medals in the first place. Even toward someone who had attacked him, Marcus maintained the dignity befitting a royal guard. Prosecutor Jennifer Mills presented her sentencing recommendation, emphasizing the need for deterrence and the serious nature of crimes against crown property. This defendant committed 14 separate criminal acts in a single morning, culminating in an assault on a decorated war hero. The systematic nature of his crimes and their target demonstrate a complete disregard for law and order. Defense attorney Michael Bradford made one final plea for leniency, focusing on Jake's troubled background and potential for rehabilitation. My client grew up in poverty without positive role models or opportunities for legitimate success. While his actions were inexcusable, lengthy imprisonment will only perpetuate the cycle that created these problems. Jake's mother took the stand to deliver an emotional appeal for mercy. Through tears, she described working multiple jobs to support her son and her failure to provide the guidance he needed. I know Jake did terrible things, but he's still my son. Please give him a chance to learn from these mistakes and become the man I always hoped he could be. The pre-sentence report painted a complex picture of Jake's life and crimes. Psychological evaluations showed deep-seated anger issues and poor decision-making skills, but also average intelligence and capacity for learning. The report recommended a combination of punishment and rehabilitation programs. Judge Hamilton reviewed all the evidence, testimony, and recommendations before addressing Jake directly. Mr. Morrison, you have been convicted of crimes that strike at the heart of what we value as a society. You attacked symbols of service and sacrifice while terrorizing innocent visitors to our city. Jake stood to face the judge, his hands shaking slightly as he awaited his fate. The confident young man who had mocked Marcus's medals no longer existed, replaced by someone who finally understood the consequences of his choices. However, Judge Hamilton continued, this court believes in the possibility of redemption for those willing to pursue it. You will serve 8 years in prison for your crimes, with the possibility of parole after 5 years if you complete educational and counseling programs. The sentence was longer than the defense had hoped, but shorter than the prosecution had requested. Jake's shoulders slumped with a mixture of relief and devastation as he realized he would spend the next several years behind bars. His mother's quiet sobs echoed through the suddenly silent courtroom. Judge Hamilton imposed additional conditions requiring Jake to pay restitution to all victims and complete anger management counseling. You will also write personal apologies to each person you harmed, explaining what you have learned about the impact of your actions on their lives. The courtroom gradually emptied as the case concluded, leaving Jake to be escorted back to prison to begin serving his sentence. His brief moment of criminal bravado outside Buckingham Palace had cost him nearly a decade of freedom and any hope of continuing his previous lifestyle. Marcus left the courthouse and returned to his duties at the palace, where tourists continued posing for photos beside the royal guards. The crown medal that had nearly been stolen still caught sunlight as he resumed his position, representing courage and honor that Jake had never understood. Over the following years, Jake would indeed complete the educational programs Judge Hamilton had mentioned. He earned his high school diploma in prison and began studying psychology, hoping to understand the thought patterns that had led him down such a destructive path. His letters to victims, initially written reluctantly, gradually became genuine expressions of remorse. The incident became a cautionary tale told to other young people in Jake's neighborhood, showing how quickly poor choices could destroy a life. Local youth programs used his story to illustrate the difference between seeking easy money through crime versus building genuine success through hard work. Marcus continued serving as a royal guard with distinction, eventually earning promotion to sergeant and training new recruits. He often told them about the importance of maintaining dignity under provocation, using Jake's attack as an example of how proper training and self-control had prevented a bad situation from becoming much worse. 5 years later, Jake appeared before a parole board having completed every program available to him in prison. He had also maintained correspondence with several of his victims, including Mrs. Tanaka, who had eventually forgiven him after seeing evidence of his genuine transformation. "I understand now that those medals represented everything I wasn't," Jake told the parole board. "Courage, honor, and putting others before yourself. I can't change what I did, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to become someone who respects rather than attacks such values." Jake was granted parole and eventually found work with a youth counseling program, sharing his story with teenagers at risk of making similar mistakes. The young man who had once mocked a war hero's decorations became someone who helped others understand the importance of honor and service. Marcus and Jake never met again after the trial, but both men had been permanently changed by their brief, dramatic encounter outside Buckingham Palace. One had proven his character under pressure, while the other had discovered the devastating cost of disrespecting symbols of sacrifice and service.